Let us refresh our understanding of some terms which have been used again and again in this entire discussion. I'll quickly just recall those terms and quickly say a few words and then we'll move on. And I'll also try to talk about the position of that term in deconstructive theory and what exactly is the debate around those terms. So maybe it will refresh our understanding of deconstruction. I also sent you a list of these terms on your WhatsApp page. So let us think about this word origin. Origin. And you see that origin, and we can say that origin is a problematic term in deconstructive theory because we can never reach a point of origin. Similarly, the word center, and you know that the word center occupies a very important position in deconstructive theory because there is this philosophical basis for talking about many of those knowledge systems which are based on a centering principle. So man as center, democracy as center, a particular concept as center, and we see that deconstructive theory takes issue with this idea of center. There was this word determinate and indeterminate that we use again and again. Determinate and indeterminate. Something which is clear, something which is understandable, something which has a kind of unequivocal meaning, determinate, and we say that the meaning is clear when we say that this text is saying something determinate. On the other hand, the word which is favored by deconstructive theory is the word indeterminate. That is something which is not so unequivocal, something which is equivocal, something which is not clear, but something rather which is unclear, something which has multiple meanings. So indeterminate becomes an important word. And similarly, we saw that all readings in deconstructive theory become not simply readings, rather they become misreadings. So misreading is another important term that we learned. Paul Deman made use of this term, and in deconstructive theory, we are often using the word misreading. Misreading does not mean bad reading. Misreading does not mean incorrect or wrong reading. So misreading may be a word which is used in our day-to-day language also, but in deconstructive theory, the word misreading appears as a concept, misreading. And there is a philosophical basis behind this concept of misreading, which means that language cannot say something determinate, and so hence all readings become misreadings. Similarly, the word pluralist. Somebody like M.H. Abrams calls himself a pluralist, somebody who is ready to accept number of interpretations which are possible of one particular text. This is a traditional position where one can talk about, say, multiple interpretations of a text. But all those multiple interpretations are valid in themselves. But deconstructive theory is not talking about that kind of pluralist view, but rather it is talking about the impossibility of saying something determinate. Similarly, the word equivocal and unequivocal, which I just used, unequivocal is a word which is favored by maybe traditional criticism, but equivocal is a term which is favored by deconstructive theory, and unequivocal by maybe more traditional kinds of readings. And of course, we are clear about the meaning of the word signifier and signified. Signifier and signified, that is the traditional distinction in structuralist theory, where you have one concept, one sound image, and that sound image, that concept refers to something. So a dog refers to an animal that we all see, right? But in deconstructive theory, we say that all words become signifiers. And when we look at the meaning of a word, it leads us to more signifiers. When we consult a dictionary, we see only signifiers. So we never reach a point where we can refer to things, or even to concepts of things. We rather refer to only use of language, signifiers and more signifiers. In other words, if structuralist theory is non-referential, it tried to say that when we use language, we do not refer to things, but rather we refer to concepts of things. But in deconstructive theory, we are saying that we do not refer to even concepts of things. What we refer to is only to the play of signifiers, more signifiers, more signifiers. So that distinction between signifier and signified, which is there in structuralist theory, is not there in post-structuralist theory. So that means there is constant postponement, constant deferral. Similarly, the word metaphysical, and we know that Derrida used this word metaphysical to refer to all those interpretations of the world which are based on a centering principle, on a centering principle. So man as a center, democracy as center, secularism as center, or liberty as center, freedom as center, around which a whole knowledge system is built. Derrida would call, say, any of those systems which are based on a particular kind of center metaphysical. And there we also learned the word transcendental. That means if a particular signifier, or if a particular concept is considered beyond the play of signifiers. So for that, man or God or democracy, that means this works as a centering principle, but it is above the play of signifiers. And so this becomes a kind of transcendental signifier. That means something which transcends ordinary play of signification. It transcends. The word logos, and you know that we learned the word logocentrism. Logocentrism, where a particular concept is put at the center. Logocentrism. And we can say logocentric views of the world. There is a logocentric view of the world in this text. Man is at the center. This is an example of logocentrism. So logocentrism gives the word logos, and logos is sense, concept, meaning, right? Similarly, there is this very important word sedimentation. Sedimentation, and you know the word comes from the field of geology, sedimentation. So you say you have those sedimented rocks, or you have a physical thing, a stone or any other thing, and it gradually collects, say, other particles, it gradually collects more particles. And in a way, you see that you can see different sediments. And when you say that sedimentation, so something which has acquired some matter, acquired some particles, acquired some substance over a period of centuries. Now here we are talking about this word in terms of language. So a particular word or a particular concept, it also has this element where it has another meaning, then yet another meaning, and then yet another meaning in the past, and then yet another meaning in the past. If we look at the roots of those words, we can see all those possible meanings. Similarly, a particular concept, it is related to all those other concepts. We can see the trace of all those other concepts. And so you see a kind of sedimentation of meaning in a word, sedimentation. Similarly, the word defer, and you know that we understood two words, defer, DEFER, and the noun form of defer is deferral or deferment, and the word differ, difference, and the two words produce one concept. And what is that concept? That concept is difference, difference, which is central to deconstructive theory. Now, difference carries the sense of postponement, and it also carries the sense of difference. You can say that this is a portmanteau word. A portmanteau word means a word which consists of two words. There are other examples also of portmanteau words. Say the word fantabulous, fantabulous, fantastic and fabulous. The word advertorial, advertorial, advertisement and editorial, advertisement and editorial, editorial. So you know that this word difference is a portmanteau word. James Joyce is famous for using many portmanteau words in his famous novel Ulysses. We learned another word, teleological. Teleological. Teleology means where things are moving towards a particular direction. Things are moving towards a particular direction. Now here you see a different kind of centering. What is this different kind of centering? In one sense, man is the center and everything originates from man. That is an example of logocentrism. But in another sense, maybe all things are moving towards a particular concept. Maybe democracy, maybe capitalism. So there, say our thinking is teleological. Teleology, that is, we move towards a particular direction. There is another word which is often used to offer criticism of deconstructive theory. That word is anarchism. Yet another word, that word is hedonism. So anarchism, you know that say somebody who is an anarchist is somebody who does not follow any norms. Anarchist comes from the word anarchy. Anarchy is, say, a system where there is no government as such, no rules as such, anarchy. And you use the word anarchy in day-to-day language also, that there is total anarchy in that place. Total anarchy in that place. Visualize a situation. You appear for an examination, for theory paper, but the invigilator gives you mathematics paper to all of you, and suddenly you see that everyone will start saying, oh, what is this paper, sir? What is this paper, sir? And the invigilator says, no, you have to appear for this examination and you have to attempt this paper only. I'm sure there will be anarchy. Sir, I prepared for my theory paper. How can I attempt mathematics paper? So anarchy is also used to talk about deconstructive theory, that sometimes it does not believe in any rules of language, but rather it is talking about a kind of situation which is a situation of anarchy. But here again, don't go by the literal meaning of the word, where there is a philosophical basis to deconstructive anarchy. And what is that philosophical basis? That concept of trace, that concept of difference. Similarly, another word which is used to offer a criticism of deconstructive theories, and that word is hedonism. A particular kind of hedonism. Somebody who just loves, say, beauty, somebody who just indulges himself in beauty. And so deconstructive criticism or some versions of deconstructive criticism are also considered an example of hedonism, where a critic is just indulging himself. And here, what is he indulging himself in? That is a kind of wordplay. A word, a keyword, its history, its traces, its uses, and so on. Right. Similarly, another word that we encountered, that word was supplement. Supplement. You know that Derrida talked about the concept of binary opposition as it was used in structuralist theory. He's talking about some binaries which exist in our world. And so the binary of good and evil, the binary of say man and woman, the binary of light and dark, the binary of light and weight, the binary of day and night. Now in these binary terms, one term receives a kind of privileging. That means one term is privileged. This is another term which we'll say here again and again. One term is privileged. So man is privileged. Day is privileged. Light is privileged. West is privileged, not east. Man, not woman. Light, not dark. Lightness, not weight. And what we see instead? That the second term in this pair is a kind of subsidiary term. And Derrida uses the term supplement. That is a supplement. So in man and woman, woman becomes the supplement. And day and night, night becomes a supplement. And so on. So you can make a list of all those binary terms and you can see that one term is privileged and the other term is, say, not privileged. And you can see this kind of say binary thinking in different sayings also. Now I'm thinking about one. पढ़ोगे लिखोगे बनोगे नवाब खेलोगे कूदोगे होगे खराब. Now if you see that line, then here पढ़ोगे, reading, study, that is considered a privileged term, and probably playing is considered kind of supplement, right? Supplement. Now if we go by Derridian logic, we try to deconstruct this and we'll see that problems will start. Say खेलोगे कूदोगे. So even in cases of traditional sayings where you see that kind of traditional wisdom, you can see possibly some logic, but there is a term which is a supplement, or there is a concept which is a supplement, right? We have had a lot of discussion of the concept of trace. Trace. Trace of another word, trace of another concept. And so in this entire say discussion of language, cat is cat because it is not bat, and so on, where one phoneme is replaced by another phoneme, right? And why cat? You use the word man, 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 mat, mat, mar, mar. In all such cases, you see that one phoneme is replaced by another phoneme, and that gives us a new signifier. At the same time, you see the trace of all those other words which this word has excluded to become itself. And the concept of trace can also be applied to, say, some concepts. Say, for example, the ideas about man, but there is the trace of all those other concepts in this, or the concept of democracy and dictatorship. You can see the trace of other concepts in one concept. So one concept is traced through many concepts. That is the view. So trace, we understand the term. Similarly, the word hierarchy. We came across this word hierarchy, but in deconstructive theory, we are talking about hierarchy in terms of this pairing. When one term occupies an important position in that hierarchy and the other term is a supplement. So in all this, we see that these are the terms which we have come across, and these are the terms which we hear again and again, and we try to refresh our understanding of these terms. Something else also emerged from this discussion, that we understood the constructive theory in its linguistic aspect, where language becomes unstable, slippery. We understood linguistics, say deconstructive theory in its philosophical dimension, where our world is full of ideologies and where we always have that kind of centering principle where knowledge systems are based on some kind of logocentric thinking. And we also looked at the question of identity, how our identity is formed of those ideological notions. That means there is philosophical dimension, there is political dimension, and there is linguistic dimension. Now, just to refresh you a bit, I would like you to hear one song, right? And I'm sure that you would like that song. Just see the words. कभी मुझे लगे कि जैसे सारा ये जहां है जादू जो है भी और नहीं भी है ये फिजा घटा हवा बहार मुझे करे इशारे चले कहानी मैं इनकी जो भी मैं कहना चाहूं बर्बाद करे अल्फाज मेरे अल्फाज मेरे ओ या ओ या ओ या मैंने ये भी सोचा है अक्सर तू भी मैं भी सभी नशीश है खुदी को हम सभी में देखे कहीं हुआ तो फिर भी सही रहे तुम्हारा मुझे माना माना है जो भी मैं कहना चाहूँ बर्बाद करे आवाज मेरे आवाज मेरे Well, So maybe I can ask you to just offer a comment. Did you follow the words here? Were the words clear? Right. So maybe Abid, we can begin with you. Something that comes to your mind?
It was like जो भी मैं कहूँ बर्बाद करे अल्फाज मेरे.
Good.
We can find some traces of deconstruction in it,
Yeah.
because it is undoing something,
Yeah.
undoing the concepts which he is trying to convey.
Right. 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 Somebody who probably knows the first few lines, but maybe other lines also. Somebody who remembers the song maybe can say something. Yes.
Sir,
Alia. Yes.
we can see that he is searching for his individuality beyond the textual words,
Mm-hmm.
because he's saying that he's something, but he's just searching for it.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing we can infer from here is that the context in which he's saying the words, I think that is so slippery that he's unable to acquire the words. So here we get two ideas. One, he's search for his reality beyond the context, the words that are forming his reality, and second, the context in which words are interpreted.
Mm-hmm. And don't you see that he's very unsure? Say, I mean, what is this world?
Yes,
Say everything, all
world is
objects in
like
the world, all things in the world. Say he's not able to make sense of those things.
what is
So
real
yeah,
actually and what is not real.
what is real and what is not real? And you know that we talked about, say, human beings. They are formed of language, and also this idea that there is nothing outside the text. So if you see this song closely, you'll find some very interesting meanings here. And forget the film for a while, right? I'm simply talking about this song. Yeah, maybe some other comment? Some other comment? Yes, please. Quick comment from somebody. Afreen, Madiha, Suhail?
Yes, sir. You can also see the aspect of contradiction or aporia where when he says that जो भी मैं कहना चाहूँ बर्बाद करे अल्फाज मिले, but he's again using alfaz to say the same thing. So it is contradiction in itself,
Wonderful.
or a concept of aporia.
Right. So we can resume our discussion. You see, there was that linguistic dimension of deconstruction, linguistic basis of deconstruction. And if we look at this song, you say try to follow this song again, you see this song and you will find that that linguistic dimension of deconstruction is very much in evidence in this song. Linguistic dimension where he is not sure. जो भी मैं कहना चाहूं बर्बाद करे अल्फाज मेरे. So that is unstable nature of language, that slippery medium of language. Whatever I want to say, बर्बाद करें अल्फाज मेरे. And why do my alfaz or my words say spoil everything? I'm trying to say something, and probably I feel that if I say something, I am the master of my voice, I'm the master of what I can say, I'm the master of my words. And here you can see that say concept phonocentrism very much there. But because even in speech, writing works by a process of difference. So to think that one can establish communion with oneself when one uses words, or one is more authentic when one uses words, and to distrust writing like what has been done in Western philosophy, right from Plato to Levi-Strauss, as Derrida points out, writing is considered secondary, or writing is considered a contaminated form of speech. So even when I use words and I believe that I am the master of my words cannot be misunderstood. My words cannot be quoted out of context because I am speaking and I'm talking about this present context. But even here, my words slip out of my control. That means because I am made of those words, so I cannot go beyond those words. I cannot go beyond my language.
It could
Obviously,
also be, it could also be that there are so many things and language at a shot cannot address all those things together, because he says Hawaii, Fizai, Ghatai, there are so many, everybody has a language, and that language within my words will not be able to encapsulate all of them, and therefore बर्बाद हो जाएंगे, I mean बर्बाद करे मेरे शब्द, because I will not be able to express. So every word will connect to so many other words, and therefore meaning is slippery. Could be that.
we can see that because there is a trace of all those other things. There is a trace, and we can also see this concept here, trace, right? So one important thing that we learn from this say intervention is that language is a slippery medium. Another important thing that we learn from this intervention is that it is not only a slippery medium, that I am not in control of my words. I'm not in control of my words. And then third important thing is that if I see all around, everything appears to me a kind of chimera. Everything appears to me a kind of illusion, illusion which is created by words. And I have this say desire to go beyond that illusion to the real nature of that thing. But what is the real nature of that thing? That also comes through language. And this discussion so far has tried to see the linguistic dimension of language. And I was bringing you to this particular point because now our discussion will be centered on this dimension, at least in one period. And here I must give some kind of context for that. But before that, I must address one question which Alia asked yesterday and also day before yesterday. Alia's question was about good and evil, whether say this particular concept can be studied. And here let us place this concept in some perspective. Good and evil is a kind of binary. Good and evil is a kind of pair where good is considered primary and evil is considered secondary, where evil is a supplement. And in this hierarchy of good and evil, good occupies a very important position or primary position, and evil occupies a secondary position. Now, this concept actually has been studied with reference to the work of John Milton. And you know that Milton talked about both good and evil in Paradise Lost. Another work by Milton, Aeropagitica, also takes up this theme. What was Milton's theme in Paradise Lost? In one line, he tried to say that I am trying to justify God's ways to man. God's ways to man. That means whatever God does, it has its own justification, and man cannot possibly understand those ways easily. But in that work, you also have this idea of evil and the idea of good. Both ideas are treated. Now, if we look at the whole thing from the point of view of deconstruction, from the point of view of origin, the concept of origin and so on, we start asking this question, is good dependent on evil, or is evil dependent on good, which is a primary term here? When did good start? Did good start after the coming of evil? Did good start after the fall, if we take the Christian view? Or if it was after the fall, how was it good if it is contrasted with evil because there was no evil? And so on. So there can be questions which in a way problematize the issue. I'm using a word from research methodology. You problematize the issue that good and evil, this distinction is probably not so simple. And you know that it is further complicated by a very interesting view. and that view is expressed by romantic criticism. We have done our reception studies, and you know that in reception studies it is important how a particular work is treated in different periods. Reception, theory of reception of a work. In romantic criticism especially, it became very important that Milton is Saturn's party. That was the view. Milton is Saturn's party. I'm sorry. So Milton is Saturn's party. Yes. The view is that Milton probably is much more in sympathy with the character of Saturn, so much so that Milton appears on the side of Saturn. Now Milton, a Puritan, Milton, a very religious person, Milton, who was writing to justify ways of God to man, he became Saturn's party because of this problematic nature of relationship. So this study can be done, right? Since there is less than 1 minute, I'll just say that you try to read M.H. Abraham's essay Deconstructive Angel and another essay by Hillis Miller. That essay is Critic as Host. Because now I'll talk about deconstructive criticism, especially what is implied by American deconstruction, because deconstruction had a very important presence in American academy. So there is this word American deconstruction. It refers to the work of many critics which were based in Yale University. And who were these critics? Hillis Miller, Harold Bloom. Bloom was not exactly a deconstructive critic, but still some work of